Hi, I'm here with David Millett. Please welcome him to the show. David, how are you doing?
I'm great, Callum. Nice to catch up with you.
Brilliant. So those of you that don't know, David is the former England athletics coach and coach of the year. I believe you've got one more big accolade around your coaching achievements, David?
Oh, in qualifications, in cricket you have levels 1 to 5 for coaches. I'm one of two that kind of level 5. They call it the International Athletic Federation and Coaching Academy Youth Chief Coach. The two of us in this country, 8 in the world that are qualified at that level.
Wow, what an amazing achievement!
For youth.
Our viewers can
as opposed to individual events.
And
I'm sure there are many more better coaches out there, but that's a claim to fame.
And, I guess our viewers can see why I asked you to read that title out.
Yeah, well, I had to check my notes.
So, David, just tell us a little bit about some of your early memories around athletics and your journey, really, how you came to be in the position you are today.
Shall I start with the coaching or the actual athletics itself?
Actual athletics itself.
Actual athletics itself. I guess the way I probably started was of a generation, born in 1954. So it's a slightly different generation than now. I grew up in the suburbs of Birmingham, and what I describe it as, I had a kind of constructively feral childhood. That my brother and I were given a lot of slack to rove around to different parks, meet up with mates, do an awful lot of work around whether it's playing football, cricket, or whatever. So my first introduction to athletics would have been doing well at primary school. So got picked up there, and then as I moved through, even when I was in secondary school, I was always part of the athletics setup, and as I was with a lot of other sports as well, and just kind of got heavily involved through being I'd only describe it as a good school athlete, and then essentially, although I did other sports, came back to it as a veteran, or as I now call master, in my 40s. I think it's part of the middle-age crisis. Could I still do it, or could I still do anything?
David, just on the coaching side, you've had an unbelievable journey. Could you share a bit of that with us?
Yeah, I guess basically what happened once I was still competing as a master, one of my daughters started getting involved in athletics, and initially it was the usual thing of asking parents if they'd like to get involved in helping out, and I did get involved in helping out, and I started going on the coaching courses, and what I found out was the messages that I was getting on the coaching courses about what was good practice and what was not sometimes happening at my club didn't exactly marry. Right. So but the club was supportive, so what I then started to do was initially get involved in youth development. So that was, at that stage, it was typically athletes about the age 11 or 12, that sort of thing, starting with a small group, and starting on that journey. And I was very fortunate at that stage that the club was far-sighted enough to pull in a chap called Tom McNabb. Those of you old enough to remember the film Chariots of Fire, right. Tom McNabb was the kind of technical consultant on that, and he was also the person that at the same time was picking up Greg Rutherford and taking him from being a very good kind of English schools standard athlete to his first championship medals as an international championship medals. And although Greg went on to work with the coaches, Tom was that important initial influence. And because we were looking at youth development, Tom was the first person that kind of reached in and rewired my brain about what you need to do to create an appropriate environment for young athletes. So they actually learn something, and it's, you know, very much competency based, building the skills and that sort of structure. So that was a very good initial introduction. And then I probably got quite lucky that ahead of the 2012 Olympics, one of the things that in British athletics as it is now, UK athletics as it was then, was looking at and saying, how do we create a legacy out of the Olympics? And some fairly smart cookies at that time said, well, the way you're going to create a legacy is by investing in coaches. So there was a lot of work developing what was called a national coach development program at that stage, using some of the extra funding. And they also at that stage were developing a system called Athletics 365, which was very much a competency based. If you think of martial arts, where you work up to your black belt, it's like taking athletes through 9 levels, starting from level 1, which was a red color, up to black and then silver, bronze, gold. And each stage, there's a progression that you can follow for conditioning and you can follow for each technical event. So it provided a lot of structure and a lot of wraparounds to do that. And we were lucky as a club to be identified by a chap called Scott Grace, who was developing that program. Coincidentally, is the other person with the qualification I was talking about earlier. And taught me most of what I know. We were used as one of 2 clubs that had something that resembled a good youth structure, to do a lot of the early filming and developing the resources for other clubs. So out of that, we became something of a model club for other clubs. And I guess I got involved in a bit of a career of going around the country, helping other clubs, setting up their system, mentoring, all that sort of thing. But based on that, so it became a career involved both in coaching and coach education, including doing a webinar tonight.
It never stops for you, does it? I know you're very, very...
Hence all the kit, you know.
Yeah.
I'm too lazy to change too many times in a day.
So I suppose just moving on to the topic of the day, which for our viewers is creating athletes, something which I know you know, for me is a big bugbear of mine, is that I don't feel cricket focuses enough on creating an athlete from a young enough age. Yeah. Just before we delve into that specifically, I mean, could you share just some of your experiences around developing athletes and sort of those, I guess, critical periods when really they need to be able to be some level of athletic competency?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat slightly on this question. You know me well enough to know that I'm probably going to go beyond athletics, because no sport sits in an island of its own. Yeah. Building on my experience and certain amount of my interpretation of that, I think if I was a parent almost carrying a fetus around at the moment, thinking I would love them to have the ideal opportunity to be a terrific sports person in whatever sport it turned out to be. The things I'd be thinking about right from day one is getting them involved in something that begins to develop that kinesthetic awareness. So right from early age, you can do things like tumble tots. It's an absolute delight to work with athletes that have done things like gymnastics or martial arts or dancing, because they have an awareness of how the body works. Yeah. And it's about and so our challenge as coaches in whatever context, dealing with children at an early age, is to create that environment where they can make that connection between their brain and their body. And they can develop that postural control. So a lot of it is in early stages, even if it's doing it in a games-based, fun-based way, making sure that they're constantly learning and exploring all of the time. So I was lucky. My background was multi-sport, even to the extent that you'll be glad to hear this. As a sixth former, I preferred cricket to athletics because I enjoyed the social side. Yes. But what you can do at a very early age is allow the child to develop that muscle memory, because you've got this phase between about, say, 4 and 11, and you can argue over the actual ages, where in a child's development, their brain is developing faster than their body. So if you're relying on just getting stronger and fitter to make progress, you're not going to do nearly as well as if you're developing skill. And that kind of developing muscle memory, what I call the myelinization process, where that circuitry from brain to parts of the body is developing at its fastest, that is the time to really exploit the skill-hungry years. So the more you do multiple skills, working around the fundamentals of, balance, agility, coordination, striking, kicking, buoyancy, with a rich variety, it's a tremendous investment.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me, David, because I remember very vividly coaching a county age group many years ago, and a parent being really worried that their child was late to my session. Yeah. And it was 3 minutes, by the way. I wasn't that bothered. Yeah. But they were really concerned, and I said to them, "Well, what's the player been doing?" And they turned to me and said, "Oh, they've been playing football." And I said, "Well, that's great, isn't it?" And they sort of looked at me stunned, like, Yeah. And I was like, the more sport, the best cricketers in the world have played everything, maybe with the exception of Virat Kohli, but certainly people like A.B. de Villiers, Joss Butler, to name a couple, have been top hockey players, top sprinters, top swimmers. They've done all sorts. And I think it is really key.
Yeah, there's a massive amount in this. I mean, through my sort of coach education stuff, the formal qualification courses, we cite examples of athletes that have gone to the top. So, Adam Gemelli had a background in football. Krishna Nagura, who was I can't remember, I think it was netball. Hannah Cockcroft, again, she'd done a variety of sports. And there are lots of pieces of research about this. One of the ones that we cite for some of our more advanced coaches, the event group coaches, is a German piece of research that shows a high correlation between people making it to world-class level in sports, and it wasn't just athletics, and having done a variety of sports at an early age. Somebody could specialize early and do very well, but there is less of a propensity to get right to the top. And I think it's that lack of building that inventory of super skills.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It certainly sounds, I mean, obviously I'm a neuroscientist as well, so I can help you with myelination.
Yeah, you can probably explain it better.
But yeah, so I mean, just rolling a little bit, I guess, into the detail of this. So there are clearly important athletic fundamentals.
Yeah.
Are you able to share a couple of very basic ones with us that really all sport, but we're gonna shoehorn it a bit to cricket, should be looking at, especially from a much earlier age, and also no matter what level they play at?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll relate to this. I'm very heavily influenced by a coach and writer called Kelvin Giles, who an Australian Brummie. I think he was originally born in Birmingham, but he's now out in Australia and has done a lot of work with various sports. And he was one of the very influential ones, thinkers and writers, in terms of the connection between fundamental movement skills and how you can progress them throughout a career. So I promise to send you through one or two visuals relating to this, and some of the visuals I'll just show just show how right from the beginning, a young child can squat and lunge, and those movements are there. And then so you can reduce some of the fundamental movements, skills and shapes and patterns. It's almost like having a cartoon storyboard. You can break down movement into combinations of squats, lunges, pushes, pulls, the great underrated bracing, jumping and landing. And you put all those together in a coherent piece, and you're developing somebody that is athletically literate. And I mean athletic in its very broadest sense, not just athletics. So you think of, one of my favorites is if you think of a fast bowler charging up to bowl, and in that delivery stride, their back foot, they'll be getting themselves into a really strong position, and they'll be extending through the hip, knee and ankle of their reverse leg, and the front leg, the knee will be driven up, right, potentially as high as parallel to the ground or getting close to it. You know, that's what we often refer to in athletics as the athletic shape. It's a really strong shape, but you have to train the brain against resistance to be able to get into that shape and hit it consistently. Right. If you're not able to do that, and you'll know this stuff better than I do, Callum, that you can, our brain and body seeks to cheat. We always try and go for the cheap solution. So you can see in that picture of a fast bowler, places where that could break down. And in that breaking down, it may mean that they've lost control, or it may mean and get some inaccuracy, or they may get tired more quickly, or it may mean they're just not bowling as fast as they might otherwise do if they'd hit the optimum shape. But repeat that time after time after time, and what you're asking for, injury. Mm. So what we're building here is a movement repertoire. So a lot of the current thinking around athletics and the better informed stuff, and it's certainly involved in the athletics talent development program, is a Calvin Giles style grid where you take the very basic movements like bracing, squatting, lunging, and you're assessing people against a series of checkpoints just on the basics of it, and then you're doing that against increasing challenge or increasing resistance. Right. So by the time somebody gets up to level 4 or level 5, depending on the matrix that you're using, you've got a really well-developed athlete, and most of that would transfer to almost anything.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? The key element, I think, for our viewers today is that this is actually for everybody. This will help you in life. This will help you with back pain. This will help you throughout whatever. Even if you don't want to be a sports person, you can still. This is still useful to you.
Yeah. You think I've got this horrible thing of a coach. I can't watch people walking around or running without dissecting the floor and the way they're moving.
Yeah.
And you can almost say, well, I apart from not running as fast as you'd like to, I could almost predict the injury you've got coming.
Yeah. I mean, just one. Well, I've got you here just on one thing on this, on running, and I kind of know the answer, but I'd like you to explain it a bit more. It's, surely it's got to be better to run a short distance as properly or as in athletical range as you can than to try to say I've run 5k, but actually the last 3k you've lost your shape and you're actually probably damaging yourself.
Yeah. I've got to be careful what I say, because I could insult a lot of people very easily with my answer. And you'll see a difference even within athletics coaches. You will see a difference in philosophy. Right. So there's probably a bit of I'm caricaturing slightly, a cultural divide between, say, a sprints coach and an endurance coach. A sprints coach in this school would pull somebody off the track before their form deteriorates too much. And the thinking there is, actually we need you to be right on it.
Yeah.
And we don't want bad habits creeping in. Whereas a lot of I'm doing a disservice to some very good endurance coaches, by the way. But if coaching is only done by training load and pushing the levers in terms of intensity and volume, and you haven't got that correction going on, you will long term, you may be able to go further if you avoid injury, but you're probably going to lose speed.
Okay. So that's good. Thank you for that, David. That's good clarification, especially for me as well, just to make sure.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's quite a slight oversimplification, but those are the parameters you're playing with.
Yeah. I mean, what sort of, I suppose just one other thing for me is, obviously I've played cricket pretty much solely for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
And 15 years. Sorry, I gave myself 10 extra, but 15 years through my adolescent years and through my 20s. You know, I know I'm very one-sided in where my strength in my body lies. And I know that also not only opens me up for injury, but also, sort of energy-wise. You know, if I'm trying to perform, one side of my body is almost miles behind the other side of my body. Have you got any sort of tips or advice on those players that have specialised, of how they kind of go around balancing that out a little bit, balancing out their muscle strength?
A little bit. I'm almost going to go back. You know, I referred to my feral childhood earlier. Yeah. I learned a lot of this stuff. You know, the old rule of learning by messing about.
Yeah.
So you know, I would never have claimed to be a great cricketer. I mean, I was okay as a swing bowler. I could do leg spin as well and mix it up and stuff like that. But I was never any great standard. But one thing I could do, at least at the level of beach cricket, I can bat and bowl left-handed.
Right.
And I'm naturally right-handed. And just do that from messing about. And even playing badminton, I sometimes would switch over to left-handed. Now, nobody taught me to do that. But funnily enough, in terms of the issue that you're dealing with, so a certain amount, in terms of developing muscle balance, how many of the routines that you do with the side preference could you do at least a proportion of working on the other wing?
Yeah. So
I teach hurdles, for example, and I'll coach people to be able to go over consistently on both legs. Wow. On high jump, during the off part of the season, I like to throw in sessions to encourage people to go from the other side.
Yeah. And that makes sense, doesn't it, I suppose? Yeah.
And there's a load of conditioning work you can do, and it has a value even in skill development, because sometimes, you know, if you're naturally right-handed and you'll practice a skill without thinking. If you suddenly have to do it left-handed, you have to stop and think about it. And how you solve that problem may inform something you're doing on your preferred side. So for a left-hander, it would be saying practice sometimes with your right, so on and so forth. I'm always shocked to see footballers that are so heavily one-footed.
Well, you just mark them, don't you? You just mark them that side.
Yeah.
Push them out, push them onto their weaker foot. But
yeah.
I mean, it's a great point, and something I'd never really thought about is around the fact that by doing it and actually having to think about it, you might actually improve your skills where you don't think about it.
Yeah, because you're moving from unconscious competence back to either conscious incompetence or conscious competence.
Certainly incompetence to me.
You're having to think about it, and it just helps you go through that point. And I think that's much easier to do if you've got a background of learning by messing about. If you've been hardwired into one approach and that's the only way you do it, then it could be a route to mental block. But if from an early age you've developed this fluidity and coordination and a culture of exploring, it becomes distinctly possible.
I think hopefully by now our viewers have realised also there's an amazing terminology that you use in athletics. Yeah. And I always, as a coach myself, I try and remember the right words, but I do get them mixed up from time to time. But for those viewers, hopefully they've realised and picked up on the different competency. There was some athletic hunger, was it? There've been a few good phrases in there that that hopefully our viewers have picked up on.
Well, it's a bit like the Morecambe Wise thing. I use all the right words, but not necessarily in the right order.
I mean, just one question that's always curious, especially from if young people or parents or coaches were a bit hesitant about getting involved in athletics, how would you recommend going about that? I know you've mentioned about Athletics 365, and that's a fantastic app. Where would you start?
I see a number of sports working very well with youngsters. So somewhere near where I often coach, I can see stuff some coaching going on with young tennis players, and I can relate to what the coaches are doing, because it's an age appropriate environment. Everything is adapted to the stage and age that the athlete is at, and it's given them a chance to explore. So I wouldn't necessarily say you have to go to athletics, but what I would say is you need to find an environment. I would encourage people to find an environment that is teaching them broad athleticism, and it isn't just locking them into one sport, particularly when we're talking primary school age. The other thing that I would say, and this is almost like a line that I'll be using in the webinar later, because it's a course for young leaders, is name me a sport that involves jumping.
Football.
There's loads. Name me a sport that involves throwing.
Cricket.
Name me a sport that involves running.
Rugby. I'll go on 3. We got there.
And there's loads, and they all use some of these shapes that I've been talking about in that fundamental movements. And if you're in an environment that teaches you how to do those properly, so for example, everything involves jumping. But I would say, looking at the athletes that I work with, when I start introducing something like bunny hops, 2-footed jumping in a rhythmic way, more than 80% of those don't land properly. It's not a natural skill. We have a basic capability, but we don't necessarily know how to do it in an optimal way. So we have to be coaching that in. So you do need to find yourself in the sports, do some work in some sports that will give you that movement literacy. Hence the respect I showed for gymnastics, dance. Some of the martial arts is very much in that mode as well. Taekwondo, terrific, and athletics offers that, but then takes it into that next stage from fundamental movements into the elements of run, jump, and throw. If you then move on to do something else, that's great. We shouldn't take a proprietary interest in people sticking to our sport. We should recognize, any of us, that we could be developing somebody for another sport.
Yeah.
And athletics is a natural gateway for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, even just in cricket, I'm happy if a wicketkeeper in cricket ends up being a fantastic goalkeeper in football. It doesn't matter to me, really. The fact is they're playing and ultimately developing their skills and hopefully enjoying themselves, and athletics is the perfect platform for that. The other thing, although, just before I move on to my last question for you on the topic, is the neuroscientist in me knows that things like dancing are fantastic potential. I suppose I have to say potential as a disclaimer, but there's a lot of very strong research that shows it prevents or slows the onset of neurodegeneration because of what you've spoken about, because of the movements, because you have to think about where your body is in space. And, I like that a lot. I mean, David, just before we finish the segment on creating athletes, where do you see the the future, I suppose, of athleticism going? I mean, is there anything in particular that either you know that's happening, or is there any particular way you think we should be going?
Well, I'm actually at one level quite worried about where we are as a society, because you think about the description I gave of how I got into sport, never mind athletics, and learnt movement. I think the opportunities for a lot of children are not there at school in the same way that they might have been at one stage. So I would love to see that. Would love to see that change. There's a lot more good stuff happening in club environments, but those club environments are essentially taking on a strain above and beyond their sport if they're going to address some of the issues that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Having said that, at the other end of the scale, sports science has moved on massively, and I think if you look at, for instance, the work of some very good kind of strength and conditioning practitioners, and you know, I'm fortunate to have done some of the UK sports and strength and conditioning courses. There's some really good material there, which is basically promoting the same thing as I've been talking about today. As those get more infiltrated, whether that's into schools or into clubs or into development, I think there will be a lot more literacy coming through, because to me it's 80% conditioning and 20% of the sport specific.
Right.
And if we get that bit right, then we'll have a much wider base of movement literate people coming through. And I think the knowledge is there to exploit that. We just hope there's the institutional will to get more of that embedded.
Brilliant. David, it's been a real privilege. That was fantastic. And thank you so much for your time. You know, I've got somehow managed to get one or two people in the country that of that level of qualification. So thank you. But before I let you go, I have a couple of quick fire questions for you.
Yeah.
So your favourite cricket ground?
This may surprise you. Addlestrop.
Oh, okay. Where's that one?
It's I spent a period living in Gloucestershire, and we used to play a lot of village cricket. So it's one of those really rural, idyllic cricket grounds in the middle of a farm, basically.
Oh, lovely, lovely. The one that you can never find.
Yeah, the ones you can never find.
Your favourite player?
My childhood hero was Clive Lloyd.
Wow, yeah,
who introduced that athleticism to fielding and all that sort of stuff. My current favourite, Jimmy Anderson.
Yeah, both very worthy.
Skill personified. I mean, total craftsman.
You're right. Clive Lloyd was the one for was it Kerry Packer cricket? He was the one that said we've got to get fitter and start with the great West Indian side that actually went unbeaten for 15 years in Test games. So he probably was on the right lines.
It was just an awesome athlete, particularly when he was younger and before injuries hit. Yeah.
Your favourite cricket umpire?
This is the one I said I duck because I don't want to say Dickie Bird, and that's no pun intended. I don't know. Did Jeff Puller become an umpire? Because I was a Lancashire fan, and he was I think he was an opening batsman for Lancashire that went on to umpire, but I could be wrong.
He might have. You've done me there. You've beaten the. I'll have a look for you, David, on that one.
Check that out. I could be wrong.
What about?
But it's a different generation. I'm a lot older than you.
I do know most, so I've let myself down there. I don't know that one. I'll have to look for you, David.
It's going back a bit.
What about your favourite athletics track?
Bedford. And the reason for that is that as a veteran, that's when I got most of my PBs. Or age group PBs, certainly not PBs.
Perfect. I can relate to that. That's great. I've got many cricket grounds where I've done well that I like. Where's the best place that athletics has taken you?
Yeah, I've been very, very lucky because although I've done a lot traveling around the UK, I've also had the opportunity, because of the youth stuff, to travel to Norway, Germany, Czech Republic, and the likes, talking on that theme. But probably my favourite is Gibraltar, because they've just moved the track. I was due to go back, but COVID got in the way. But they've got this very interesting thing. They've got a lovely track, or they had a lovely track. It's now moved to the other side of the island, but it's right by the airport. So you'd have a session interrupted by a plane coming into land or taking off. And you'd also got this lovely background setting. I've got it on my one of my Facebook pages of the rock at Gibraltar. So and really nice people. So I guess that.
And the last one, if you could meet any current athlete, who would that be now?
Yeah, I met again. I could give a 2 point. I met one of my heroes, which was David Hemery, who, when I was growing up, and he was a 400-meter hurdles gold medalist. But I met him actually through coach education, and that was enlightening. Very interesting guy. But of something close to the current generation, it'd have to be Usain Bolt.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I think the guy's amazing. But yeah, so thank you for that, David. And so we typically finish our program with the same question. And as you have had a cricket career, however long, I will finish with the same question.
Or unspectacular.
I'll finish the same question for you, which is, David, what is the single most important value or aspect of cricket for you?
For the bit of advice I'd give anybody getting into cricket is invest in your mental and physical development. Look after your body, nurture your way through it. You think, and this is hence my admiration for Jimmy Anderson. Sports people of that size, scale, that have that longevity. It doesn't happen by accident.
David, it's been a real privilege. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon when the lockdowns lift a bit more.
Lovely to catch up with you. Take care, Gavin. Thanks for having me.